Senator King, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McGregor, one of my principal concerns as the ranking member on, we call ourselves co-chairs with Steve Daines on the National Parks Subcommittee, is staffing at the national parks. 10 or 15 years ago, well, let me just put it in perspective. In the last 15 years, staffing at the national parks has fallen by 15%, not counting the cuts that have been made in the last couple of months. Visitation at the national parks has gone up 15%. So we already had a staffing problem. So my request to you is stop cutting people at the national parks and start hiring them, because the parks are a gem of America. People visit them. They expect them to be maintained. They expect them to be open. They expect to be able to not have to wait in long lines in order to get into a park. So can you commit to me that we're going to stop cutting in the national parks and we're going to start to rebuild that very valuable staff?
Sir, so many members of this committee raised that issue because I think they, and we understand how important it is to keep those parks open, especially for tourism and economic dollars that are flowing into your communities. So I absolutely will commit to you on making sure that we work to have the appropriate staffing levels to keep those parks open and get as many people as possible into them.
Well, I would hope that the appropriate staffing levels be somewhat higher than they are today, given the fact that we already have a 30% gap in what's happened, forgetting about the recent cuts. So this is essential, and I think it would be a great disservice to the American people to compromise the availability of our national parks. Second thing on national parks is maintenance. As you and I discussed, the Great American Outdoors Act, I think, was one of the signaling achievements of the first Trump administration, which had a big piece of money for deferred maintenance. The problem is we're still deferring maintenance. And I fought all the way up to the Office of Management and Budget in the prior administration to try to get the maintenance budget increased. It's a false economy to not make repairs. They're only going to have to be done in the future, and they're going to cost more. Will you work with us and work with the Congress to increase the maintenance budget at the national parks? It's not very exciting, but it's something we have to do.
Sir, coming from the private sector, I understand the importance of O&M dollars on an annualized basis, but I will say this, it's interesting and there's a lot to dig in on the implementation of the Great American Outdoors Act. I find it, we talked about how, you know, we worked to advance this amazing legislation and now maintenance backlog has somehow gone up. We have a lot of work to do together on this, and I absolutely commit to working with you on it.
Well, one way to keep it from going up is to quit digging the hole. And that's what we're doing right now. Mr. Danley, I agree with you about permitting reform. I was one of the supporters of the bill here. I'm hoping we're going to be able to bring that bill back to life and perhaps improve it. I assume you agree that part of the permitting reform has to be transmission to permitting reform, because we're all talking about increasing electricity. The electricity has to get somewhere, and transmission is one of the real serious bottlenecks right now in sort of reinventing our electric system. Do you agree?
So to date, the real problems with federal permitting haven't been seen in transmission, because other than the backstop siting authority.
Are you serious about that? Because we've got transmission projects in the West that have been pending for 20 years.
So for the most part, other than when you have federal land crossings, which do of course occur in the West far more than they do in the East, but the places where we have the greatest sets of constraints, the highest congestion costs, are in the East more than the West. This is typically, obviously there are examples where that's not true. Those are most siting and permitting happens at the state level for transmission. There's only, for transmission lines generally, there's the backstop siting authority that was reenacted again.
Right.
But of course, transmission has to be part of the solution, or part of the discussion, because as the demand grows and we have to have a more robust transmission system, both to meet NERC reliability standards and simply get real power to its destination, we're going to have to increase transmission lines all over the country.
And that's got to be part of the solution. Quickly, research. You talked about research. One of the things that disturbs me that's going on now in the administration is cutting research money all over the place. Department of Health and Human Services, even research on Alzheimer's, which I absolutely don't understand. The Department of Energy is one of the leading research parts of our government, and I think you mentioned basic research being important that's not immediately commercially valuable, so it's not going to be done in the private sector. Fracking was invented under Department of Energy research grants back in the 80s. Do you agree that we've got to maintain the research budget, not only at the national labs, but at places like NREL and the other work that the Department of Energy is doing in research on energy development generally?
Yes, the Congress has charged the Department of Energy with conducting this research. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the number of advances we've had has changed America's commercial outlook and has created new industries. And the money spent on basic research, the national labs found quarks. These are things that are not commercially viable on their own, but have improved the science of the world. I myself wouldn't know a
quark if I fell over one, but I understand.
Nevertheless, they are important. And
sure.
I absolutely agree with you that this research is important and is central to the function of the Department of Energy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can have a second round because I have a few more questions.